Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hope. My name is Tammy Lynn Connors. This is my YouTube channel and podcast, helping other people evolve. Today, I have my friend Davy with me. How are you today, Davy?
I'm doing great, Tammy. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you. So I told Davy when I talked to him the other day on the phone that once you're on my podcast, you're my friend forever. So you're kind of stuck with me now, just so you know.
Fine. I love that.
So I always tell people, I don't know, God just has a way of putting people in my lives. And I always say to people, my belief and my faith is in God. Whatever yours is, the universe or whatever it is, I hope that you continue to have that faith in order to be able to overcome things and get through life, basically. So I get on TikTok a lot, and I came across Davy's TikTok, and I noticed that he was in recovery and he's a fitness coach and a whole lot of things. And it just really intrigued me. So I reached out, and I'm blessed, Davy, that you said yes to do this podcast with me. So thank you very much. You're in California, correct?
I am Orange County.
Orange County, nice.
California.
Nice. So I just want to explain a little bit with everybody what my mission and vision with Hope is. And so when I started this, I felt as though there's so many people at home struggling all by themselves. They feel like they're the only one going through a struggle. And many of you have listened to some of my podcasts, and I've been through quite a few struggles, but here I am today, able to have strength, get through them, share my stories to help you. And hopefully what happens is you hear Davy's story today, or you hear my story, you hear AJ or Jamie or Kevin's, and you get out of bed that day and you can just walk outside and be like, well, they got through that. Maybe I can get through my day today. And that's all that my hope is with this. So I love sharing these stories. And for me, it's a blessing, Davy, because I get to hear other people's stories, and it just changes my life, just the blessings of hearing a story. So I know that you're in recovery. I guess maybe we'll go back and talk a little bit about maybe your teenage years. And then you said in the Army you went, and thank you for your service, by the way. And
of course.
Yeah, let's just share a little bit here.
Well, Tammy, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to tell my story, and I'm hoping that if just one person can get something out of it, then I've done my job here today. But yeah, just to kind of start at the beginning, I grew up in South Side of Chicago. I kind of had a rough childhood. I got the best of both worlds. My earlier years were pretty rough, and my teenage years were a little shaky. I guess you could kind of explain me, if someone was to explain me, I was a good kid, but I had a lot of built up anger, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I actually wrestled during school. That was a good way for me to get my anger out without, getting in trouble.
Yeah.
So, I actually enlisted in the military at age 17, right out of high school. I needed some discipline, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the military. My brother went to the military. My uncle went to the military. My parents were kind of like, why don't you go to college? Why don't you do something else? And I was like, no, I'm going to go to the military. And I remember asking them to sign my, because of my waiver, because when you're 17, when you're under 18, you have to get a waiver from your parents.
Right.
And I was like, I'm turning 18 in 3 months anyways. Like, you might as well sign it. And they did. And that started my military career. I was stationed in Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Okay.
And went on one deployment to the Middle East. I was actually there for 1.5 years. And that's pretty much when like my drinking started. That's when I started to have like some issues that I couldn't explain. I wasn't getting any less angrier. If anything, I was more angry. And that was the first time that I can remember that I drank alcohol and it made everything feel better. Right. And it wasn't easily accessible overseas. We were like getting it shipped off in Listerine bottles. So it was like a treat when we did get some alcohol. But I remember, I remember thinking like, I feel nothing when I drink. And I wasn't able to drink heavily, but I bookmarked that, for when I got out. And I got out of the service in 2012, and I could drink freely, right? I relocated to Seattle, Washington, and I didn't know anyone. And so I met all my friends at the bars.
Okay.
Right? And now, granted, drinking wasn't a problem then. Okay. Right? I do believe that I was always an alcoholic from the beginning, but my disease hadn't progressed that far. I was drinking on weekends. Things were fun, just like the commercials, right? Everyone's holding a cold beer and his music's playing, and you go home and you're like, tonight was the best night of my life. Like those were the times I was having at the beginning,
Right.
and I think it's really important to kind of talk about that because it wasn't always bad. There
Yes.
were good times, things were cool. And so what I didn't notice is that I was using alcohol for everything, slowly but surely, right? Whether I was happy, whether I was sad, whether, it was sunny out, whether it was rainy out, my alcohol was my everything. And
Mhm.
as time progressed, I became more dependent on it.
Mhm.
You know, I had my beautiful daughter in 2014, September 11th, 2014, and that actually slowed me down a little bit. I was like, well, I want to be a really good dad. Like, I'm a single dad at that moment, and it was so important for me to be a great parent because at points in my life, things were shaking in my childhood, right? So it was really important for me to show up. And it did slow me down. I was like, okay, guys, I can't go. I was the only one in my friend group with a kid. And on Friday nights when they're like, dude, we're going to the bar, I was like, I got Addie this weekend,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and that kind of slowed me down, but that didn't stop forever, right? I started having girlfriends and things like that and getting help, getting babysitters. Like I was gonna find a way to have fun. I was 23 years old.
Right.
And like I said, slowly progressing. I'm drinking more now. Now I'm drinking on Mondays, right? Taco Tuesday, Wild Out Wednesdays, Thirsty Thursdays, Freaky Fridays. Like there was always a reason now to
Right.
drink. And
Yeah.
but I was young, I was able to drink all night, stay up till 4 in the morning, and still make it to work. Hangovers weren't that bad. And I used to justify, I didn't realize I had a problem because everything on the outside was cool,
Mhm.
right? I used to be like, well, there can't be anything wrong. I have a job, right? My
Right.
kids taken care of. Like I have friends, and I think that my perception of what an alcoholic was back then was like, well, that's a dude that's living under the bridge.
Oh, it's so good.
And,
It's so
and I'm not living under a bridge. Like like everything's fine. And I wouldn't, so this is kind of how it went. I started to notice there was a problem, right? But it
Mhm.
wasn't the alcohol, right? That was the last on my list of things that it could be. So
Right.
first it was like where I was living. I was like, man, it must be where geographic, right? I gotta change where I'm living. So I moved to another city, and then it was like, man, it must be this job.
Mhm.
So I switched to another company, or it was someone I was dating, and I was like, well, I just need to get a new girlfriend. That'll like fix everything. And meanwhile, the problem is still there. I'm still drinking. I'm drinking more and more and more. And I realized that nothing that I did made me feel better. The
Right.
only time I feel better is when I was drunk, because
Mhm.
drunk was my normal. And so I was miserable. Age 27 is when I finally was like, I was so miserable. At this point, I was dependent on alcohol,
Mhm.
right? I had to have it in the mornings, or
Mhm.
I couldn't function. I drank at lunch. I was hiding it, right? Once I started hiding it, I was like, why am I drinking it out of the back of my trunk? Or I'm having to go make these little trips to the grocery store. It was becoming like, it was starting to own my life. And I started to realize that too. I was like, wait a minute, this can't be normal, you
Right.
know? And I remember talking to a couple buddies. I'm like, man, I think because I was always known as the guy that never blacked out, right? 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, let's go.
Right.
Everyone else is dead on the ground. And I'm just like, what are we doing?
Right. Right.
And that was like a superpower that I thought I had, that I could just drink more than anybody else.
Right.
And I started to notice, I was like, man, still not I was an alcoholic. That word didn't come into my mind until like the last moment. But I do remember when I finally realized what it was. And I was sitting on the couch and I was, of course, drinking, right? And at that point, I'm not glassing it, right? It's just straight out of the bottle because I'm like, dude, what is going on?
Right.
And a commercial came on for like a treatment center. And he was like, I remember him saying, I think it was one of those old school Malibu commercials or whatever. He was like, do you or someone like, are they suffering from, alcoholism or treatment or substance abuse? And I was like, I, I am. And a light bulb went off,
Oh boy.
right? A,
Right.
a, a light bulb went off. And I remember being excited, right? Because I was like, I know what's wrong with me. I
Right.
know what it is. I know what the issue is. I remember I called my girlfriend at the time. I was like, babe, I'm an alcoholic. Like that's what's going on with me, and it runs in my family too. You would think I would have picked up on this
Mm.
sooner,
Mhm.
but I remember being excited, and I remember saying, you know what, I'm ready to kick this thing,
Mhm. Yeah.
up
Can I
until this
stop you?
point.
Please
Yes,
stop.
of course.
I just
Yeah.
want to back up before I forget some things. So there was a couple of things that you said. The one thing that you said that really hit home with me was how that you didn't look at yourself as an alcoholic because the stigma of it, right? The guy that's sitting underneath the bridge, or the lady that's on the corner, or they got the brown bag in their hand. And I related to that a lot only because I grew up also, my father was an alcoholic and very abusive to my mom. So growing up, I saw that. And the same thing as you said, right? Like I had fun when I was drinking when I was younger, and then one day it all caught up to me, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute!" And when you mentioned Listerine, I actually used to drink Listerine in the morning to
Oh
get me,
yeah.
to do that. But when I quit drinking, I'll never forget this, and it clicked with me because the day that I quit, I weighed probably 85 pounds, and my eyes were yellow. I had pancreatitis 3 times, in and out of the hospital. And when I quit, I remember calling my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I'm an alcoholic and
Yep.
I got to start going to meetings and this and that. And my mother said to me, well, you're not that bad. It's not that
Hmm.
bad. And the reason, and I never understood why she would say that to me, like, good, go. And the reason was because in her eyes, an alcoholic was my father. The
Hmm.
abuse, the not coming home, all those things that go with it, where I was like you, I was functioning, I was working, I was taking care of my son, I was doing all those things. So when you said that, I just want people to know that, right? Like, just because people are living the best life to you that you can see, they might be suffering inside, with the alcoholism,
Absolutely.
the addiction. So I just wanted to add that in there because that stigma is so, my stepdad was the same way. If you're drunk, you live on the streets, right? And
Yep.
it's not like that. So anyways, I just wanted to stop that. And thanks for pointing that out because I think that means a lot to hear that. So
It does mean a lot, it really does. And for me, like now I wear it as a badge of honor, right? Like I'm in sobriety. Like I'm a recovering alcoholic. Like that, I know what's going on with me,
right.
and I can treat it. And I was guilty too when I thought of an alcoholic or a drug addict. I was like, now all my friends are. Most of my friends are recovering
Right.
alcoholics and drug addicts, and they are the
Right.
best people that I've ever met in my life.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that as time goes on and we get more awareness out, we can stop judging, what an alcoholic looks like,
Right.
and realize that we look all different,
Right.
different shapes, sizes, colors, creed, ethnicities. It doesn't discriminate.
Exactly. So sorry to interrupt you there. I think you were going into shoot, I remember just a second ago. Do you remember what part you
Yeah,
were?
yeah, for sure. So when I realized that what the
Yeah.
problem was, up until that point in my life, I had done everything for myself. I was a very prideful human. I was very egotistical, right? I was the type of guy that I would be on fire, and you would ask me like, "Well, do you want me to put you out?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm fine."
Mm.
And my dad told me at like age 17, right before I left for the military, he was like, "That pride is going to kill you one day."
Mm.
And I remember thinking, "I'm going to show you."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
And so I lived this life of not asking for help, achieving everything on my own. I wasn't even praying to I wasn't even praying to a God, right? Because Davy did it, Davy earned it, and Davy can do what he wants. That's
Right.
how I thought. And then I'm faced with this disease,
Mm.
and now I'm like, oh crap, well, I haven't practiced asking for help. I
Mm.
don't know what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to rely on other people. Well, I'm
Mm-hmm.
in trouble, right? I mean, I'm in trouble because what I tried to do at the beginning, I went to my first treatment center, 28 days, and I had that same mindset, like I got this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I got out and I relapsed on my birthday for the first time,
Right.
right? And I couldn't, and I was just sitting there and I was like, how did it get me?
Right.
Like how did I didn't do anything anyone told me,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't trust other people to get things done, right?
Right.
I still was the word surrender, right? I remember I heard the word surrender. They were like, you got to surrender. And I'm an army vet, right? I'm tough. I don't surrender.
Right.
I don't surrender to nothing, right? And I saw that as such a negative word of me surrendering to something,
Mm-hmm.
which is different now, right? Now I believe that when I surrender, I'm able to give it away and kind of move on,
Right.
So that changes. But like the where disease is taking me, it's been
Mm-hmm.
right up and down, up and down, and I've had different rock bottoms, and I've gone through different. Looking back at everything that I went through, if I would have listened from the beginning to what those that have gone before me had said, it would have been a lot easier.
Right.
It would have, but that's just not how I work, right? And is such I even used to, when they said it was a disease, I was like, no, it's kind of hard. I can tell you right now, like I've almost drank myself to death,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know why, right? Because it gets to a point where I'm drinking and I'm now a prisoner of
Mm.
alcohol.
Yes.
I know that I want to stop. I know that it is killing me, but this is the only thing that my brain is telling me to do.
Mm.
And it gets to a point where, okay, now that I know I'm an alcoholic, for me there was no going back, right? Like I could not now, like now that I know this information, drinking was never the same,
Right. Right.
right? And when I did slip, it was just bad, like the fun times were gone, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But I did I got into AA. I went to 12-step programs. Those worked really well for me once I learned how to give in
Mm.
and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step for me was being able to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to my first meeting, and I was just like, I don't understand how me doing these things are going to help me stay sober. It doesn't make sense. Like I'm analytical. It doesn't make sense to me, right? And I would go in there, and everyone would just be so happy.
Mm-hmm.
It was like fake. It was like, oh yeah, David, they put on this whole show because they knew you were coming today, right?
Right. Right. All for you.
All for you, David. Get out,
Right.
off. But regardless of what it looked like and what I thought, I was so miserable that I wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be happy. I wanted to experience what everyone else was experiencing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so I would have some time and I would slip. I would have some time and I would slip. And for me, I became obsessed with time,
Okay.
right? And I put so much, I guess, obsession with how much time I had that I didn't even realize why I wanted to be sober.
Mm.
I didn't even. It was, to me, it was just like I need to get more time, right? Like this is the cool thing to do. This is the cool thing to do. And I was just like, you know what? I slip. I remember my first relapse, and I remember having to go back to a meeting and be like, "Hey, I'm Davy, and I drank." And I remember someone, an old timer, coming up to me. He was like, "Well, goddamn, of course you drink. You're an alcoholic."
Right.
And
Right.
it made me feel better, right? And I stopped obsessing about how much time I had, and just because for me, I'm the type of person, right? If you tell me you got to do this for the rest of your life, and I think a lot of people are like this, you tell them you got to do this for the rest of your life. Whoa, the rest of my life.
Right.
That's a lot to chew,
Yes.
right? But when someone tells me, dude, just stay sober for a couple more hours.
Right.
Just stay sober for today.
Yeah.
And that's how I adopted the motto for my fitness is better than yesterday.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
To kind of not to downplay, but to let people understand that it's okay if you struggle. This thing doesn't have to be perfect. There is no perfection,
Right.
right?
Right.
But whether you have 1 minute, you have 1 hour, you have one day, it all matters, right? You got to get back up and you got to fight the good fight, you know?
Right.
And so as time went on, I started to adopt the principles, right? I got out of my own way, right? I started to be of service. I started to do all the things that I was like, I'll never do that. You
Right.
know, I lived in sober living. I lived in a sober living house, and I was like, I'll never live in a house full of, and I ended up in sober living, and it was very humbling.
Mm,
The thing about me is it was real easy for me to build up, but I would knock it right down,
mm.
right? Like, and I would say it again,
Self-sabotaging comes in.
self-sabotaging to a T.
Yeah,
Tear down and build it back up. And I'm like, look at me, I'm building it back up. It's like, well, why don't you stop knocking it down?
right,
You
right.
know, and this what this disease has also done for me is I got my relationship back with God, right?
Mhm,
My
mhm,
spirituality, right?
mhm.
And that's something special and unique for every single person.
Yes.
I don't like to dwell on the whole God thing too much, but for me, I had to, when times got hard, I had to have something to reach out to, something to hold on to when I just couldn't go on anymore. I had to pray to something, right? And I
Yes.
think that's special for every single person. Everyone has to find that on their own.
Right.
But for me, I was like, okay, like I went all these years of thinking that my stuff didn't stink,
Right.
and when I hit I was humbled to my knees, where I was like, okay, if there's something out there, I need you to show up right now.
Mm,
Like, this is the time. I'm ready.
right.
And I maintain that relationship with my higher power, my spirituality. That's really important for me to do on a daily basis.
Yeah. So when you just talked about that, you got on your knees and said, "Hey, I need you. I need whatever it is," like you said, right? My same thing, mine's God. But when I did finally surrender, humbled myself the same, I laid on the floor. I really kicked and screamed and cried and yelled and said, okay, okay, I have to have help with this disease or I'm dying. I'm going to be
Right.
dead. My
Yep.
son's not going to have a mom. His dad was already incarcerated. So and when I finally surrendered and did that like that, and I talk about that a lot, whether, like you said, your spirituality, whatever it is, man, once you finally give that up and humble yourself and just give it over and start using the tools that you learned from all those years that you've been there, right?
Mhm.
I was honestly blessed. I always say this about my kid's dad. I had two kids with him, and he taught me about AA and Al-Anon because I went to meetings with him all the time. Otherwise, I would have never even known about AA when I quit. So, and it's that, giving it up, surrendering. So, yeah, I can totally relate. A lot of what you say is the same, right? And that's the thing too, you get in those rooms and you start hearing the stories and you're like, wait a minute, were they sitting
Mhm.
next to me when I was doing this? Because their
Yeah.
stories, they can be, they're so different, but still the same, like,
Right. It's so important, you
yeah,
know. And then I had the idea. I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna get through this, because I wanted what everyone had, but I wanted to do it on my own,
mm,
right? And I think the key or a big part of not even just being an alcoholic or substance abuse or mental health in general, because I got other things going on. I'm not just an alcoholic. I got other things once you put the bottle down, you're like, oh my God, I got all this other stuff too.
mm,
A big part of that, and a big part of like where it has taken me, is getting with other folks just like me, and talking about it,
yes.
right? Like, there's so many people that suffer from so many different things, and someone needs to be like, hey, I'm one of those people.
Mhm.
I got this, right? And for social media, how I started my fitness, I was like, you know what? I'm big and I'm buff and I'm doing push-ups on screen, right? And I
Right.
was like, I feel like I'm just like everybody else, like given this whatever, that I'm perfect and that things are just great and I got a six pack, and I was like, that I don't want to be that person, right?
Right.
I want people to be able to relate to me, and realize that I struggle with things,
Mm.
and then in hopes that someone will hear that and be like, man, you know what? That guy struggles, like he's an alcoholic, like he has PTSD, he has trauma, and he's okay to talk about that on a social media. Yes, I am. Yes, I am, because we got to stick together. And I believe that the only way for us to start to move in a different direction is if we start to relate to each other and not look for the differences in each other.
So good. So
You
good.
know,
Yes, it's
right?
For sure. I know that I listen to Trent Shelton a lot. I don't know if you do or not, or you know who he is, but he's a great guy to follow. But one of his quotes that helped me a lot was, my transparency will lead to someone else's transformation.
Love
So
it.
if we've been through it and we keep it to ourselves, God's like, no, you have a story of hope. You have a story of a struggle to a strength. Your story, you don't know who, like you said earlier, like one person hears this that we could help. So by us sharing and not being selfish with our stories, I guess, and not being afraid of the, you know, the lashback from people, like you said, you know, look at him, man, he's, you know, a personal trainer and he's buff and he's got abs and he works out. And then, you know, the highlight reels are there. And then when the real life comes and you're like, yeah, but I struggled with alcohol. And then we're like, somebody's like, oh yeah, see, he's doing that, but he did that. And our transparency, though, someone looks at it and says, oh shit, he's talking about it, then maybe I could share a little bit of how I feel. And
Right.
you said talking about it, and we're going to get to the mental health part in a few minutes, but talking about it helps so much,
So
period.
much.
And once you know that there's other people you can relate to and talk about it, your whole life's going to change, you know?
I totally agree. I totally
Yeah.
agree. And it works two ways too, Tammy, right? When I talk about it, it helps me, keeps me sober,
Yes.
right? And then
Yes.
I'm able to reach out and touch someone on the flip side. So it's a win-win for myself and then whoever's on the other end of the screen too, you know. And I will tell you, it took me some time to be able to say things like this
Yeah.
outwardly in front of other people, right? Because I'm the fear of like how will they perceive me?
Mhm.
Then you get to the point where you go through so much. You know what? I've earned the right to be able to say, hey, look, I struggle and I am not perfect, and nor do I want to be perfectly imperfect.
My
Love
tattoo.
it. Perfectly imperfect. I didn't even see that, but that is what I'm striving for, right? Like I am perfectly imperfect and it's beautiful in every single way.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that so much. So were you drinking when you were doing the training too, or did you start that after you're drinking?
So I've been in sales for the past 10 years.
Okay.
And so I started personal training just now about a year and a half.
Okay.
And for me, what happened was I had been in corporate America for the past 10 years. But I was also trying to stay sober,
Mm.
right? And God was telling me, he was like, dude, like this is like you're good at this, but this ain't you. And
Mm.
I fought and I fought tooth and nail. I was like, well, sales is all I know. Like I don't know anything else, right? Like, but it was getting to the point that they would send me on a work trip or a convention, and I would drink because
Mm.
I'd be locked in the room. I'd be early sobriety, and I'd be locked in the room for a week in Vegas,
Right.
and it wasn't working with my lifestyle. But I could not let it go. I was still holding on to it. Uh, September of 2022, I tore my ACL, my both meniscus, fractured my patella, and I was off work. I had surgery about 2 weeks later, 2 to 3 weeks later after having the injury. And here I was in bed, and I was like, wow, you know, and and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna quit my sales job.
Mm.
You know, I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna quit, right? And I remember calling and being like, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back. I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I was like, I'm not coming back. I know I got to get rid of this, and I'm just gonna have faith that God's just gonna guide me into the right thing.
Right.
And I got certified. I got certified when I couldn't even walk. Right, I was just in bed studying and uh and that injury, I did drink. Like I drank during that injury, you know, like things got bad, you know, like I was having a hard time with the pain meds and the things like that. But I got back up, right? I got back up and I started to hit the gym and I was like, you know what I want to do? I want to train people for the rest of my life. You know,
Mhm.
I want to do something that I want to do,
Mhm.
right? Because when I'm training folks and I'm giving them you know coaching and I don't feel like I'm working. I may be tired, right?
Right.
For sure. But when I get home, you know, at the end of the day, I don't feel like I was working. You know, I volunteer at a couple halfway houses and detoxes, And I get there and they're happy to see me on most days. But they're happy to see me. I'm happy to see them. And nothing brings me more joy than someone being like, man, I can't do a push-up. And I'm like, yeah, you can.
Right?
Like, no, I can't. I'm like, why can't you? They're like, well, I never did a push-up before. I'm like, well, let's do it together. And then
Yeah.
3 weeks later, they're like, hey, Davey, look, 10 push-ups. Right? Like, that is amazing to me, you know?
Yes. Yes.
But then I felt as though there needed to be something more, like, because I didn't want to just be the cliche personal trainer,
Right.
because I think that sometimes God, what he has in store for us is a lot bigger than what we think. If we
Mhm.
listen, he's like, look, man, I know you think this is what I want you to do, but I actually want you to do this. And he was like,
Mhm.
I want you to tell people. I want you to tell people what you've been through. I want you to tell people what you struggle with. That's what
Yes.
I want you to do. And I'm like, God, are you sure? Like, I'm doing pretty good with the whole personal training thing. Like, we don't need to. And he's like, no, that's where I want you to go. That's what
Yeah.
I want you to do. And once I knew it, now it was like, okay, when am I going to do it? Because I kind of just sat on it for a couple weeks. I was like, oh
Mhm.
God, like, and then I did it. And now what I do is like I train in home, I train, in gyms and things like that. I volunteer for detox facilities and halfway houses. But I have a passion to work with folks with substance abuse and mental health disorders because
Mhm.
whenever I sobered up or things like that, fitness, the first thing I wanted to do was get my body together
Right.
because I had like destroyed myself so much, and I was feeling good, I was thinking good again, and then I'm like, well, I want to look good, feel good, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and it is such a good outlet for me, coupled with therapy, right? All these other things, right? I'm not saying that fitness is just going to save anyone's life
Sure.
because it
Sure.
doesn't work like that for me. But fitness coupled with like other forms of therapy and programs and 12-step, it just all came together for me. And I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is it. And like when you finally find your passion, there's a feeling you get of, got you. Okay. Because I went from wanting to be an FBI agent as a kid to wanting to be a top level sales executive of a Fortune 500 company. That's where I was going. I wanted the big house. I wanted the fast car. I wanted the ladies. And then God was up there just laughing, like, if only
Right.
he knew. If only he knew.
If only you knew, right? That's
If
so.
only I knew. My life looks nothing of what I thought it would, but I am so happy with the way it turned out. I'm
Yeah.
so happy. Like I couldn't even have guessed this, and a lot of that comes from like me just being of service, just being with other people, you
Yeah.
know. And I worried about where the finances were coming from. I was like, well, how am I gonna make money?
Right.
How is money gonna happen? And I realized that when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're compassionate about it, the bills will get paid, right?
Right.
Like everything works itself out,
Yes.
you know? And so I get to live a life where I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh my God, I get to go see these folks. I get to work with so and so.
Mm.
And that's my life now.
Yeah.
I go to bed easy at night. I'm happy,
Yeah.
and like I said, I think you said you were gonna touch on the mental health. Like I have
Yes.
other things, once I stopped drinking, I had to like face some real demons, right? Like PTSD from my deployment and trauma and things like that. And I come in contact with a lot of folks that aren't, either they have dual diagnosis, right? They're alcoholic, drug addict, right? And they're bipolar, eating disorders, things like that,
Yeah.
right? We all have something in common.
Right.
It just looks a little bit different,
Mm.
you
Yes.
know. It looks a little bit different, and for example, my buddy, he's dealing with a situation where his girlfriend has an eating disorder, and he's like, I don't know how to deal with it. But he's in recovery, you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
And I'm like, treat her just how she would treat you,
Right.
right? It's a different disease,
Mhm.
but we still have to treat it kind of in somewhat the same way,
Sure.
right? With love and care and things like that. And so, I guess my goal is to to really like learn more about all the different mental health issues and things like that, right? That is my goal, and I'm just getting started. But now that I know what I want to do for the rest of my life, it kind of takes the weight off me. I'm like, okay, I can fully give into this. I can go head forward, headstrong into this, and give my all to what I want to do for the rest of my life.
So good.
Just
And when you said that, like, you listen to what God says, right? Like, he's like, do this. And you're like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. It's like, yeah, you are. And then, like you said, then you have this injury, right? And now you're laying in bed, right? And he's like, well, now I got you. Now I'm going to throw this personal training right in your face so you can figure out this is what you want to do. And I talk about this a lot too. I post this on my social media a lot. Like, life is short, man. We don't know how much time we're going to have here. And living in a miserable job, a miserable relationship, a miserable place where you don't want to live. There's so many things out there that people just think they're stuck, and you're not. If you could you just have to have that faith of a mustard seed. And listen, and if it doesn't work out, okay, so you go do something else, right? If it wasn't what it was supposed to be, and like with you say that. And I, in 2018, walked away from my job. I made good money. I was a dealer at the casino, and it was just the time. Like, I wasn't happy there. A lot was going on. Well, I quit my job. I left on March 28th, and my 16-year-old nephew lived with me and my mom, and he ended up having ulcerative pancreatitis and had to have his colon completely removed. We went to the hospital on March 30th, and a week later, he was getting his colon removed, and he had 9 major surgeries in the year after. And if I wouldn't have left my job right when I did, I wouldn't have been able to be there with him. I mean, I would have got fired eventually, but I was able to be there, and God always made sure, like you said, my bills were always paid. It didn't matter. I was doing what I had to do. And it's just that faith, and to do what we want in life. I believe we're all here for a purpose. I believe we all have a gift. And whether your gift is baking cookies or cutting lawns, whatever your gift is, we all have it. But man, we just got to use it and love it, because life's short, it's too short. Do that. And I kind of him-hawed a little bit about my podcast. I said I was going to do it. And 2020 on March 9th, what would that have been, like my 16-year sobriety? I was going to launch it then. And in February, my friend took a Percocet. It was fentanyl, and he passed away. And so then that kind of threw me off. And then COVID came, and then another friend of mine was murdered, and then my mom passed away. So 2020 went like that. And I was like, and then in 21, God was like, you better start this, like, seriously. So I did it. And it's been a true blessing, because people like you come on here and share their stories. And when you said a little while ago too, not only does it help the other person, it helps you.
Helps me.
That's what it is. Like, your story's helping me, and me sharing my story helps me too, right? So it just all goes, right in that little roller coaster of continuing going, not this, I guess, when I said roller coaster. But so can we touch a little bit on mental health? Because I know you said, I believe that everybody, especially that struggles with addiction, of any sort, there is something else in there. It's usually just not like, oh yeah, I'm going to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. Something happens. And then as time goes on, we're masking it more and more and more. And then, as you said, when you got sober, then you had to face those things. And I think that's a lot of times when people go into a relapse. Now, I've been blessed. I've never relapsed. So I thank God for that every day when I wake up.
Right.
But when you go through that, I think a lot of people use that as their excuse, because they're like, well, this just happened to me. I'm going to go drink again. And not that I think that they just don't know how to use the tools that they have, or they don't know how to deal with the mental health part of it, whether it's depression or anger or whatever. So, and the PTSD. So if you could just maybe share a little bit about, in your community and things like that.
Yeah. So, I was in the Black community and the African American community, like, mental health it's not really talked about a lot. Like, and not to, shame my parents or anything, because they weren't raised like that. Right. They weren't raised we never talked about what was going on up here. Right. And in the military, right. I went straight from that to the military. You're definitely not going to walk around like, hey, I'm feeling kind of this today. They're like, yo, what are you talking about? Right. And so I never got time to ever talk about what I was feeling. and nor did I think it was important. You
mm,
know, like for me, strength was always physical. I'm
right.
strong, right? But what I realized is like I was very immature emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
and I probably had the emotions of an 18-year-old.
Probably.
I didn't know how to deal with them. And one of the scariest things about getting sober was me having to deal with emotions.
Mm-hmm. For
They were
sure.
scary. I mean, I was like, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm happy, all these things. And these are all the things that you should feel, right? But I was just like, man, it's just too much. I don't know what this is, because I have been numb for so long. And then you get all these emotions back, and you're like, wait a minute, what is all this?
Right.
Right. And that in itself can bring someone to be like, I'm not dealing with all these emotions. It's too
Yeah.
much. Let me go back. Right. Naturally, my brain's like, we could always go back to that.
It's
You
easy.
know, we can always do that. And I'm just like, no, maybe we can, maybe we gotta, think about this for a little bit.
Right.
But for me, I think that the I had to start talking to a therapist,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
that was huge for me.
Mm,
I sat down with someone and I was like, not sure how this works, but I don't really think I have anything to talk about, right? And she's like, well, let me challenge you on that. Let me talk to you about that. And come to find out, I had so much crap, right? Like I had like trauma from abuse, and I had, like I said, the deployment PTSD, and I had abandonment issues, and I had so much stuff, and I was like, man, where do I start at? Where do I even begin? So the alcohol was just, I mean, alcohol itself is just a liquid. It's not bad.
right.
Right? But when I take that alcohol and I cover up all this stuff, that stuff is going to come out no matter what. That's what I realized,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
All that negative emotion, all that stuff in there that's bottled up, it's going to come out regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the goal for me was like, okay, how can I let this stuff out in a healthy way?
Right.
And so therapy, right? I used to think that therapy was for the weak.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
who goes in a room and they talk about my feelings? Like, tough it up, right? Tough it out. And
Right.
now I'm that guy in the room, like that, because I look forward to my sessions with my therapist.
Yes.
And I always
Yes.
have something to get out. And so that was huge for me. I was like, okay, I got to get real. I got to get real with another person. I have a sponsor, right? And they were like, call him every day. I was like, I'm not calling anybody every day. I don't even talk to my parents every day. And I
Right.
call that man so much, and I get real with him, and I get open, right? Because all of my feelings and emotions are valid, is what I realized.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
And then I learned that it's okay. If I'm sad that day, this is
Mhm.
how emotionally immature I was. If I'm sad that day, it's okay to be sad.
Yes.
I didn't know that, right? If
Right.
I got a little angry, it's okay to be angry.
Yeah.
Like, these are things that are okay. I'm like, wait, is everyone just out here just feeling emotions? Am I like, I didn't realize that it was okay for me to feel all these emotions. I didn't
Yeah.
have to run from them, right?
Right.
And I never like suffered like from clinically depressed,
Right.
but I would have off days, right? And so now when I have an off day, I reach out to someone. I'm like, yo, man, I'm having an off day,
Right.
and I wait it out, right? And it passes.
Yeah.
And then when that bad day passes and I get through things, it builds my confidence to know, wait a minute, I don't have to drink. Like these emotions pass, and they
Right.
and they do,
Right.
they really do. And that's why, like, I like when I speak to someone, and they're like, I'm just really sad, I'm really depressed. And I'm like, it's gonna pass. Let's talk about it.
Right.
Let's get it out, because it does pass. And you're like, wait a minute, I made it through yesterday. I've gone through some hard things sober,
Right. Yeah.
like like parents getting sick, and things with my daughter, and all these things happen, right? And when the more things I go through sober, and I realized that I didn't have to drink, because this is what I realized. Something happens, right? Dad gets sick, right? I go drink.
Right.
Dad's still sick.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right.
That doesn't heal dad. So I'm like, well, I would prefer to be there for dad sober than to go drink and not be present.
Yes.
And
So,
so those are things that I had to realize, that the alcohol is not, it's not changing anything. My problems aren't going anywhere,
right.
you know? And
Yeah.
so I firmly, like, I'm such a believer in, like, mental health is just as important, if not more important, than any other type of health.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for
You
sure.
know,
For sure.
anxiety, right? Like, everyone drops anxiety nowadays. Like, I'm so anxious. I'm so, like, everyone has anxiety, right?
Right.
That's all. That's normal, right? It's a normal human thing to feel.
Right. Yeah.
But my anxiety is a lot less when I just talk about it and get it out. And for me, like, I have to connect with other people, that I go to a meeting and everyone's like, man, this is how I feel. And I'm like, this is how I feel. And I leave and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so much better.
Right.
And all I did was talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you said like, when you go, if you go see a therapist or a counselor, you thought of it as, you know, I'm a weak one. And so my mom thought because I'd be like, Mom, you really need to go see a counselor, because she really had a lot, right? And she'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, are you saying I'm crazy? And I'm like, well, no, you don't have to be crazy to go see a counselor. You know, you just need to, and people don't realize, I say this too about sobriety, and my friend Sonia and I talk about this a lot. Like, Davey, you don't walk outside. I don't walk outside, and God puts this big bubble around us and protects us because we're sober. And he's like, okay,
Nope.
nothing's going to happen in your life. No, it doesn't work like that.
No,
You
not at
know,
all.
everything still happens. And now, like you said before, you just take the bottle and go hide from it, you know, and never deal with those feelings. I just talked to a really good friend of mine today, and he's a guy, and his dad passed away a couple of years ago. And he's got a little boy now, a baby. And he said to me, he's like, yeah, he's like, I don't understand. My dad's been gone almost 2 years. And I actually started crying during a movie the other night, because I should be over this grief. And I was like, no. And he apologized for talking to me about it. I'm like, no, don't apologize for talking. That's what you need to do. And you're going to have those days, you know, like you said, you're going to have a day that you're sad or you're mad, you're happy, all the day, all those emotions are going to come in. But now we have those tools to use to get through those days. And you know, like you said, to pick up the phone and call somebody. It
Yep.
doesn't hurt anything. I have
It
this
does.
thing when I think of somebody. Now, I didn't do it for a long time, but let's just say you came across my mind, Davey. I'm going to send you a text and be like, hey, how are you today? 9 out of 10 times when I send that message, they're like, thank you, I needed to talk to you today. But
Mhm.
they're afraid to reach out is the thing.
Yep.
You know, and then when you said about the counselor, people go to counselors, those counselors are going to do mostly listen to you. Mostly
Mhm.
that's it. And
Yep.
they might give you a couple tools to get through things, but usually it's just you sharing what's going on. And they're like, okay, well, maybe you could try this or this or this, you know, and it has such a stigma again, right? About counseling, and, you know, you're belittling yourself doing it. And they're like, no,
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
You can't just go, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Like, this thing needs, you gotta take care of it,
Yes.
you know, and maybe some more than others. But for me, like, if I'm not taking care of this, nothing else matters anyways.
Right.
Because if I don't stay healthy upstairs, there's no there's nothing positive gonna happen in my life.
Exactly.
Like, nothing's gonna happen, you know. And I've been to the point of where, in my rock bottoms, where I was like, I want to die,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And you get to the point where you're like, I don't want to live, I don't want to die, I don't know what to do. And the only
Mm-hmm.
thing you can do is get up and move forward, right? You
Right.
know. And there's just so much beauty in the struggle, you
Yeah.
know. Like, there's so much, like, I look back on my rough times and I'm like, you know what I did? Like, I got back up.
Yeah.
And it was times where I was like, I'm down, I'm out for the count. There's no way I can get back up. I don't have another get back up in me.
Mm-hmm.
And you get back up, and you start fighting, because you gotta fight, right? You gotta push through this thing. That, like, all these mental health and these diseases and these substance abuse and all that, yes, they want us dead, they want us to be miserable, right? It's a malfunction in our brain. And so we got to fight these things, right? And so if we all come together and we're like, hey, this worked for me, this worked for me, this worked for me, that's the medicine right there, you know. when
Yeah.
i was when I was drunk, and I went to the hospital, and I was like, yo, doctor, can you help me? You know what he told me? He was like, all you can do is go to AA. This is
Mm.
a man or a woman who has studied, you know, to be a doctor for how many years?
Right.
And they are dumbfounded because they're like, there's nothing we can give you.
Right.
You got to go with your people.
Right.
That's what they're saying. They're like, you got to go get right with your people who understand you. You guys need to come together as a community and talk to each other about it. That's what we have found to be the closest thing to a cure, which there is no cure, but that's how we stay healthy.
Yes.
We come together and we talk about it, and we share stories, and we make each other realize that we are not alone and that we are strong, and then that we can do this together, and then we can live happy lives.
Yes.
Like we don't have to suffer. Like why should we have to suffer?
Exactly.
There is no magical pill. Someone gets diabetes, they have to manage their insulin. But this is our medicine. This is right here what we're doing. This is how we stay healthy.
Yes. Yes. So good. So good. Well, I'm super excited. This was a great interview. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. I'm sure you're busy, and doing this with
Never
me.
too busy for you, Tammy.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. So is there any last little thing you want to say to everybody before we wrap it up?
All I can say is, it gets better. It does. And if you are hurting, and if you need help, just reach out to someone. Reach out to someone. Just make that call. Don't give up. Don't give up, because like myself, like you, Tammy, and like so many other people out there, like we understand.
Right.
And so you got a crew of people all around the world who understand where you're coming from. All you got to do is reach out and let us know that you need us, and we'll be there.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, that's awesome. And that's so true. Don't be afraid to reach out. I know that phone gets real heavy when you go to
Yes,
pick
it
it up.
does.
It weighs like 500, and people are afraid to ask for help. That's a big thing. I was the same as you. I don't need help. I got this, And then when I finally did and surrendered it all. So, well, thank you so much for getting on here. I hope you have a great day. I always tell my guests, I can't wait. Maybe we'll come back in 6 months, maybe a year, or maybe even sooner, just to see where you're at, Davy, and all the things that you have going on out there in beautiful California.
Thank you, Tammy.
All right. Thank you. You have a great day. Everybody, thank you so much for getting on Hope. I hope you all have an amazing day. And remember, your struggles are there, I'm sure, but the strength is there in you. I'm positive. So hopefully you heard the story today and it helps you to get up and know that you can tackle the day today. Thank you.